We are going to get started with our webinar, The Outlook on Travel in the Next 6 Months. Joel will be managing the slides from in behind. First of all, as most of you know, I've come back to Canada in the last 10 days. It's been very interesting to, in the last 2 weeks, I guess, to be here and get a sense of the vibe. As you know, I've been out of the country for the better part of almost 2 years since the start of the pandemic. And for me, what was most special was having the chance to meet some members. This is a shot last night. I got a chance to meet just a few members out in West Toronto, Mississauga area. And I did the same in Ottawa about a week and a half ago. And what I must say, I really missed what Wheel and Anchor is all about, which is the camaraderie we have among people who have traveled together, people that have made friends either on one of our trips or came to us as friends. And, the smiles and the laughs and discussing, obviously a lot about travel. And this is the community aspect of Wheel and Anchor. This is really the essence of what we're all about. Of course, we are a travel community. We're a travel company. We do trips, but the point of it all is to get people together who have a like-minded view of travel and to and have a good time as we explore the world. So that's what it's all about. And on that note, in case there's anybody that has not is new to Wheel and Anchor, just a brief few words about me. I've been around travel for over 30 years. In the meantime, bringing Canadians from all across the country to places all around the world. This is my life passion, my career. I adore it. I love it. I'm an avid traveler. And I come from a background in hospitality, actually. I went to school in Austria, which for me is one of the places that's kind of an epicenter of what hospitality means from a traveler, from a tourism standpoint. And to that end, I took some time a couple of years back to write a book called The Heart of Hospitality and put a picture of it there, where I looked at Austria through the lens of a traveler and also looking at the past experience I had in going to school there and what hospitality means and how that's exercised, and speculating on how that sort of looks in other parts of the world. It's a big part of what we are at Wheel and Anchor. I pride myself on, on hospitality and ensuring that local version of it is wherever we might be is done in the best possible way, and also again in the spirit of Wheel and Anchor. So that's what we are all about. And in that vein, as I say, we are about bringing travelers together for like-minded experiences. This is the essence of who we are. It's how we differ from other companies that operate in the market, where you sign up for a trip, you don't know who's going, you get the itinerary, and then you go, and that's fine. It's more often than not a great experience, but it's a better experience when you get to share those laughs and you treat each other like friends, like you were members of a tennis club or a golf club or something of that ilk. That's kind of the vibe that we have created at Wheel and Anchor, and about sharing all the memories. Just like I said last night, getting together with a few members I hadn't seen since 2 years ago or more. Joining me on the webinar today. So again, I'm Gordon, founder of Wheel and Anchor. I'm joined by my business partner, co-founder Joel Curry, who's doing the technical stuff in the back. Paula, whom many of you will have spoken to, is our senior trip specialist. And she is the one who is handling she's doing all the heavy lifting. Well, we're all doing heavy lifting these days, but about getting you booked on trips, getting all your questions answered. And Elsa, whom some of you may have spoken to, I haven't introduced her actually before. Elsa's been with us for almost a year. She does our trip planning and operations. She is an absolutely brilliant individual, very passionate about travel, very detail oriented, and she makes sure that all these things that we promise we're going to do, we get done. And so that's her role. So that is our core team here at Wheel and Anchor. Today, we are going to be talking about you as travelers who are, as we say in the slide, impatiently waiting to spread your wings. We're all so desperate to get back to travel. I've been blessed. I got to do a few months in the fall. And I know, speaking to members on the phone and to some extent in person, we're all anxious to go. So we're going to take a little journey through what that's going to look like, or what I anticipate that's going to look like in the next 6 months. And that's our mission today. And first and foremost, I think that the perspectives that I've heard, again, talking to members in the last few months, is that as well as to my own group of friends and family and so on, is that there's pretty much two camps where everybody sits in today. Either you have a strong concern about the possibility of catching COVID, about something bad happening, and you're just not ready to travel. And so there's still a lot of people, a lot of our members, a lot of people in general who very much are in that category. And they're waiting for that moment when they feel it's going to be okay. And secondly, that, there's that other set of travelers out there who, realize that there's some risk, and at the same time understand that you just can't wait forever, and are still planning to go ahead with travel, subject to obviously decisions being made about, what we can expect. And for me, there's a very important point here, that being, in my mind, you need to satisfy yourself. You need to be comfortable and confident about wanting to travel. So, we're going to give you a bunch of information today. You're going to open and read the newspaper. We have information streaming at us from all kinds of places, talking to other people, friends, people who are already traveling, maybe down south already. And you're going to hear all kinds of information. It's up to you to, deep down feel you need to be comfortable to travel. And if you're not, I suggest you don't, because, there's no sense adding stress into this whole mix. So that being said, let's try to take a look at the present situation. And, the most obvious news that we have is, as of yesterday, as the federal government has reversed their decision to regarding this advisory against non-essential travel. We had some debate about that yesterday as I met with some members and in my own mind. First and foremost, I want to say we are obviously not scientists. We are not epidemiologists. We know as much about this pandemic as probably most of you in terms of where it's going. So I don't have a definitive answer about where this is going. And I say with all due respect, I don't think the government does either. I mean, they have a lot more people around them that are giving them information, and they're making decisions based on stuff that they're hearing. But those decisions aren't necessarily reflective of what people actually think, and what is maybe in the best interest of those people. And again, talking specifically about travelers. And then we have to take into account the media. And the media is, in my mind, perhaps the least objective, because, as the old saying goes, newspapers are there to publish news that sells newspapers. And I think that is still very much the case. It's not to discount any of those things. We need to take regard for everything, and try to understand what's going on. And so, taking that into account, looking at, I took a little bit of time leading up to this webinar to sort of try to understand the statistics. And some of us have been completely, we buried ourselves in statistics, and we're looking at case numbers, and we're looking at death numbers, and we're trying to make sense of all of this. And as I say, we're not authorities on this subject, but, I kind of step back and I look at this, and this is the global graph coming from Worldometer. It's, the number one Google search item that comes up, and to see where this has come over the last 2 years. And, what's been interesting is that globally, this thing has sort of gone up and down into phases, in 2 month segments. And the dotted line at the end, by the way, is what I drew in. So I'm not a scientist. Again, I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about, but it would seem, particularly in light of the revelations of the last few weeks with Omicron and so on, that this thing is kind of going to follow the same pattern as it relates to the number of cases. It's going to go up. But we've seen it in Europe recently, in Austria and Germany, the Czech Republic, the numbers skyrocketed. They also plummeted back down a lot quicker, actually, than in the sort of the 2 month window that seems to have been the trend over the last couple of years. If you look then, for example, at the fatality rates, as to what's happened, these, have also gone up and down. But what's interesting here, if you look at the tail end of that, and again, the dotted line is from me. This is not no special scientist drew that line. And I think nobody's drawing that line because nobody actually really knows the answer to this. If you've, thought back to how this has evolved, people they're making broad projections, but they're not making specific projections because we just don't know. But if you look here, and if you look in particular at the next slide that we've done, where we've overlaid the cases and the fatalities, they followed a pretty similar path. kind of makes sense. But I've circled there in red this window of optimism where you can see that in the most recent wave, which sort of has begun in Europe, back at the sort of in end of October, that's gone up. The fatality rate has not gone up in sync as it has with previous waves, which probably suggests a couple of things. Vaccines are working. The mitigation measures that are being done in countries around the world are working. So it points to, and again, I cannot say this with any scientific evidence, but it points to the fact that we're heading in the right direction. And I think that, that is something we need to consider as we decide what we're going to do in the next couple of months, the next half of a year or all of next year in terms of traveling. So on that subject, let's talk a little bit about how travel specifically is going to be affected. Now, I've read tons of articles and listened to podcasts and the news from all kinds of different people, and so as have all of you, I'm sure. I mean, it's obviously dinner table conversation at every single meal. And there's no question that this COVID or coronavirus, to be specific, is going to be around for a long time. It's going to be around through all of next year and probably well into the following year. And, as the scientists are saying, at some point, this is going to transition from being pandemic into an endemic situation. And so, what that means and what we're already seeing is that we are just going to have to get used to it. We're just going to have to get used to dealing with it, much as we had to get used to all the security measures that happened, after 9/11 occurred. And, we had to get used to taking our shoes off every time we went through security at the airport and all these measures. And it's just the way it's been. Another couple of things to mention about travel in 2022, pent up demand. I think that goes without saying. We all have it. We're all dying to go. And so we're going to see some pent up demand, which is going to have an impact on the availability, because the supply in the travel industry is really going to have a hard time catching up. And we're certainly seeing that in terms of hotels and ships and airlines and all the rest of it. That is leading to inflation. That's obviously the other topic that's sort of make headlines. That is not as quickly apparent in the immediate future in the next 6 months. So it's not affecting the prices for any of the trips that we've contracted for the first half of the year, or even pretty much all of next year. But 2023 already, the partners I work with overseas are already saying, we're going to see price increases. It's just, there's no two ways about it. I mean, all of this, the inflation that's happening from other segments of the economy is going to impact travel as well. Let's talk about flights for a second. And so, the aviation industry as a part of the travel industry has been, among the most affected by all of this. You can see as, the global aviation industry, the number of flights has increased, obviously since it started, and then took a drastic setback in 2020, and is coming back. I remember airlines at the beginning saying they expected them to be back to normal by 2024. I think that's still possible in terms of number of passengers travel, but the makeup of those passengers is going to be different. Business travel, as has been said from the beginning, is probably not going to return to the same levels as it was before for a long, long time. I don't want to say if ever, because of course the economies are growing around the world and just more people are going to eventually travel. But, companies have realized they don't need to travel so much. What we're seeing as specific to our members and booking flights, so far, people are getting deals that prices on tickets that are comparable to pre-pandemic levels for the most part, but they're fluctuating wildly. I remember talking with Paula a few weeks back, and it's just like we were booking flights for some folks to Madeira, and it's like one day it's like, oh, okay, here it is. It's it's around $1,200, and it's like, oh my God, it's $2,000. I mean, these spikes happen because the systems that determine prices by the airlines, the dynamic pricing is, their systems have relied on consistent data over the years, and that data is now all over the place. It makes no sense. So even the computers are confused. And so you're going to see spikes all the time. So patience is suggested. Inventory and routing options are not the same. Not all of the routes have been brought back, needless to say, and we're seeing that with South America, for example, with obviously a lot of large parts of Asia. So the same routes aren't there. You have to go a different way and make an extra stop where you didn't have to before. Schedule changes are happening all the time. We get literally daily emails about schedule changes, some mostly minor tweaking by an hour or two here and there, sometimes major flights still being canceled. And I think that in light of Omicron and country restrictions that are come into place, that is likely to continue. So, every time these comes in, we have to not freak out. We just have to say, okay, this will work itself out. The airlines that previously were very flexible on tickets are back to more of their original rules. So there's more flexibility now, perhaps than in some cases. But so they're not charging the change fees. But I did a webinar about this some months ago. Even though they're not charging the change fees, that doesn't mean that if you have a ticket from Toronto to Paris and back today, and you don't want to take that flight, and fine, you might be able to change it to March break, for example, or Easter. But if the fare at that time is different, even though there's no fee to change it, you're going to still have to pay the higher fare, and that's very, very important. I want to make sure everybody recognizes that, remembers that. So flights, complicated, and for us, a ton of work to try to figure out. Let's talk for a minute about travel insurance. Again, lots of uncertainty, and we try to talk to the companies that we work with. There are so many companies out there. The most important thing I want to tell you about insurance is we as travel agents, we're effectively travel agents, actually cannot give specific information specific to insurance policies. We can quote you on an insurance policy, and we can, send you the list of inclusions, what's covered, but we can't legally give you advice about insurance. You have to go to the insurance company itself. And so what's very important as the rules change, rules, when I say rules, I mean like the travel advisory, it's important that you understand what the inclusions and exclusions are on your policy documents. So, now is a time when something happens like this travel advisory, it's time to take a look back and read the fine print. And if you don't understand it, call them and get in touch and get your question clarified. COVID is a known event. So I always use the analogy, you can't buy fire insurance on your house if there's smoke going out the back window. So COVID itself is a known event. And so if an advisory comes into place, or a lockdown, or some other COVID related event, your cancellation policy may not apply. So COVID is typically excluded from cancellation policies, not all of them. And again, so what I'm telling you now is not advice, because every policy is different, and I'm not allowed to give you advice. I'm just giving you some tips, things to watch out for. So if you look at this recent advisory, you've booked, you've paid your trip, you may say, okay, well, I need to cancel. That may not be covered because of COVID as a known event, unless you have a special rider on that policy, a cancel for any reason type policy or something like that. As far as COVID in destination is concerned, there are policies that do cover if you contract COVID, because COVID in the meantime is becoming, like any other disease that one might contract if you're traveling out there in the world. So it may very well, in fact, cover you for contracting COVID and the costs related to that. There are also trip interruption policies. So trip interruption insurance is if something happens along the way from the moment you leave and you need to return home early because of something. So some of those policies will cover COVID. And there are also cancellation policies that will cover if you test positive for COVID prior to departure. The airlines also, for example, Air Canada have said, if you test positive prior to your scheduled flight, they will allow you to change, again, subject to a change in the airfare to a later date. So lots of information to digest. And again, it behooves all of us to take a look at the fine print and understand exactly what your policy says. And again, we don't want to avoid questions coming into our office by any means. We obviously here to help everybody out. We're overwhelmed at the moment with requests and questions and all the rest of it. But as far as insurance is concerned, please do contact your insurance company. let's jump on to another topic. What's happening in terms of mitigations out there in the world? Broadly speaking, and as you know, I've traveled through 8 countries between September and the end of November. So I've been around Europe. I've seen what's going on. Generally speaking, what you can say is the same measures apply as what's happening here. The degree of compliance, the degree to which people are actually abiding by those requirements does vary from place to place. I was shocked when I was in London that despite the fact that masks were required, this was at the beginning of November, less than 50% of the people on the tube were wearing masks. It was a bit disconcerting to me, to be perfectly honest with you. But by and large, I would say in many parts of Europe, they're following the rules. So what does that mean? It means when you go inside any building whatsoever, any public building, but even hotels or apartment buildings, you have to wear a mask. And you have to show a vaccine passport to enter any public place or any restaurant or bar or go into any attraction. And talking about vaccine passports, this is a copy of mine. And I'm one of the ones who is lucky because I used to live in Austria. I happen to have one of these EU digital COVID certificates. These will be harmonized with the Canadian certificates in due course. I cannot tell you when that's going to be. The government has promised it's going to happen early in the year. I have to tell you, I showed my QR code at a restaurant in Quebec, and the guy went to scan it, and I said, "That's not going to work. This is an EU one," and it actually worked. So there's a positive sign that our certificates are going to work. Regardless, your certificate from here will be accepted when you go around traveling around Europe as proof of vaccination. It will be accepted. We've not heard from anybody that they've had a problem with that. So I think that's an important point to make. Ardell, I just noticed your question now. I'll come back to it at the end. So sorry about that. Another thing that's happening, as we have here in Canada with the ArriveCan app, almost every country has their own arrival protocol. So the same information has to be filled in: where'd you come from, make various declarations, and where you're going to be, contact details. Some of them include a tracking component, so you have to have your Bluetooth on your phone, so that if you have been exposed on your trip into the country or at any point, that you can get a notification and take appropriate actions. Entry documents. Europe, unfortunately, like Portugal, we're going to Madeira in February, has now reinstated a requirement for a PCR test to enter for Canadians. So if you're coming from the EU, but unfortunately we will have to get one. So as we approach our trips, we're going to let you know at least a month ahead of time, so you've got time to take the necessary precautions, the necessary measures to be able to enter the country safely. Of course, a lot of people are wondering as well, what are we doing? What is Wheel and Anchor going to do in terms of our trips? What are our mitigation measures? And so I want to share a few things with you. We've just created a health protocol document, which we'll be sharing with everybody first that's booked on one of our trips, because I foresee it evolving as we go on, like everything is evolving. Number one, I think that to the extent that you can go and get a booster shot, I think that's a good idea. And I think that perhaps goes without saying. So if you haven't already booked one and you're planning to travel with us or wherever, probably a good idea to go and get that done. I don't see any reason not to. And so it can only be a benefit. As you know, our number one mitigation member is that all of our members must be vaccinated. Fully vaccinated is defined by Health Canada. So 2 shots is, I think, for most people in Canada, because the Johnson & Johnson isn't available here. But again, that booster shot is recommended. We require that everybody adheres to the regulations that are local, in addition to the ones that we may impose. And I hate to use the word impose because it sounds so imposing, but we're probably going to go to a little bit or a greater, an extra degree of caution on our trips, particularly if we see that there's an escalated, an elevated risk, and we're going to be watching this all the time as we do now. So for example, even on our private transportation, on our minibuses, on our vans, on our trips, probably we're going to require that people wear masks. I know we all hate the masks, but because we're going to be out and about and, our trips have a lot of free time, It's just very difficult to control where people have been. So to the extent that we're amongst one another as a bit of a duty to one another, I think it's important that we respect that. And when we are forced to be close together, we take those precautions. We are going to procure wherever possible, or I don't say wherever possible, I'm sure that's going to be possible everywhere, but rapid antigen tests, so that it's not like we're going to make you stick a swab up your nose every day. That's not sort of the intention, but we will make them available so that if you have any signs or any feeling of anything, that you can immediately take that and have some degree of feeling that you're secure, that that nothing's wrong, or if is something potentially wrong, that we can take appropriate steps. And so as part of all that, we're going to have everybody sign a little pledge which says, yes, we're going to follow the rules that we've imposed, which may change from day to day, from time to time, as the host, which will be me for the next few trips for sure, will determine. And any other hosts that we have on future trips are all going to be trained on, what are the signs to watch out for? What are the precautions we're going to take? And I'm sure there's questions out there about, well, what happens if someone gets sick and all? It's very difficult to answer those questions. We obviously have protocols for, any kinds of emergencies, and we're going to be enhancing them, but every situation is different. And so first and foremost, it's about prevention. And beyond that, we're going to, do our best to make sure that we're able to run our trips and that we're going to be able to do as we want. Other thing I want to touch on, again, looking out over the next 6 months, the next year, frankly, is our cancellation policies. Joel, next slide. So we are, as you have seen, we've been moving our no fee cancellation back as far as possible. So typically how our cancellation policies work is we charge a deposit up front. Those monies are held in trust for as long as we can. And believe me, and I've shared this with some members, I'm trying not to pay anybody until I have to. And so typically we've had a small administration fee because, as you are probably aware, there's a lot of work in processing every booking. It may seem simple. You get a piece of paper, oh, this is great, but there's a lot of background work for us. But we've waived that. And we've been pushing the date by which there's no fee for cancellation back as far as possible. And I know some people will say, oh, well, these big companies out there, they're saying completely flexible until, a month before, or whatever the cases may be. It's quite frankly a bit more difficult for us as the small guys because we don't have the purchasing power. We can't tell these hotels, wow, we have 10,000 room nights booked with you, and if you don't give us our money back, we can't play those games that the big guys can. We have a lot of other benefits and things that we offer our members, but that makes it more challenging for us. In general, regardless, so what's written on your confirmation letters in terms of our policies is the official word on it. And so our policy in general for trips is we won't cancel unless it really is a problem. If there's a lockdown in the country, if we cannot experience the trip the way it was meant to be enjoyed, or obviously if flights get canceled or there's a lockdown such that, the hotel, in those circumstances, we have no choice and we'll cancel the trip. And where is the line between, let's say today the government issues this travel advisory and leaving to Portugal, to Madeira in February or Cyprus in March? I can't answer that question. At the moment, I think it's safe to travel to those places because the likelihood of contracting COVID there is no greater than it is here at home. But we have to watch this from week to week. So as far as that's concerned, as I say, our cancellation policy is as it is written in your confirmation letter. Our unspoken policy is we are doing our best to hold on to your money in trust as we're required to do by law. And that if we do have to cancel a policy, we can give you back whatever we can because we've kept it. And we've also been negotiating these force majeure policies with our supplier partners to say, if we have to cancel because of COVID, for example, I sent messages to all of our hotels and partners in Madeira. I said, travel advisory. This may affect our trip to Madeira in February. And I've said, I'm declaring that this is a force majeure event. And so, we aren't going to get penalized for that. most people in the industry have been very understanding and have been very flexible in working with us on that. And so, my perspective is on it is I want to be able to, if we have to cancel, I want to be able to give you all your money back. What actually happens, we'll have to determine at that point in time. Let me give you Koh Samui is a perfect example of talking about cancellation. So as you know, we had upwards of 70 to 80 members booked on Koh Samui in January. And we made a decision to cancel that trip maybe earlier than we should have. Technically speaking, we could go to Thailand now. I'm hopefully on my way there in the next 2 weeks. We could technically have traveled, but in retrospect, and considering, Omicron, which we didn't know about when we canceled it, and other factors, we made the right decision. I believe I made a gut decision to cancel that trip. And as much as many people were disappointed, based on what I've heard from what's going on in Thailand, which is improving greatly, by the way, it was the right decision. And one other small anecdote that I wanted to share with you. We had a couple that was booked on one of our trips in the spring. They had to cancel, not related to COVID recently, and their deposit was non-refundable. We were at that point in the evolution for the trip. And so they said, and they did not have cancellation insurance. And so they said, listen, we understand we're going to lose our money. And I said, no, we have your money still, because we are lucky we hadn't paid it out. We're giving it back. And they were completely surprised. And then they wrote back to me and they said, no, we actually want you to keep some of it. And I said, no, we're not actually going to keep any. We're going to give you your money back. And they were completely surprised and delighted and yeah, and that's just how we are. I mean, I'm in this to facilitate amazing experiences around the world. I'm not, and of course, hopefully at someday make a few dollars in the process. Anyway, I'll leave cancellation policies for a little bit. So that's a little bit of an overview of the state of the industry. And I could ramble on for ages about various other things that are happening. And, I'm always delighted to talk to members. We have a lot going on, right, to ensure that we can go and that we can go in, unless it is really not safe to do so. So I see Wally just asked a question about a level travel for advisory advising not to travel to Cyprus. To be honest, Wally, I was not even aware of that. So I'll look into that and we'll get back to you and everybody booked on Cyprus about that. This is one of the problems. Information and advisories and comes from different countries about different things. How do you stay on top of it? How, it is challenging is a vast understatement. I want to take a few minutes. I want to give you a little bit of an outlook, particularly those who aren't booked on any of our trips, what's happening in the next few months. So I'm just going to briefly touch on the trips that we're doing sort of for the first half of the year and let you know where we stand on those. And first of all, though, I want to do a short poll. We're at the poll, right, Joel? Yeah. If you would just take a moment, we're going to put a poll question up on the screen, which is, are you doing if you are traveling in 2022, so if you've got travel booked, are you doing a rescheduled trip? Oh, Joel said it's not working. Okay. Can I click poll? Okay, just bear with me for 1/2 a sec. Okay, so Joel, I cannot click poll. Okay, so we seem to be having a small technical issue. Okay, so yeah, okay, so we're having a technical issue. I'm sorry about that. Our poll system doesn't seem to be working. I wanted to check in with our members to see if you were if you're planning to travel in 2022, whether it's a trip that's been postponed from a prior year or if you're going on a completely new trip, not specific to us. Anyway, we're not able to do the poll, not to worry, let's move on. So so I guess the poll isn't working at all. So Joel, let's skip down and talk about our trips that we're going to be running in the next 6 months, God willing. And so we'll jump forward to Madeira. So Joel, if we want to just jump forward to Madeira. So the first trip that we're going to be operating is in February. We've got a very good group. In fact, we're almost sold out. Sorry, Joel, I'm not sure what's going on here. A raise of hands to poll. No. Okay, so we seem to be having a couple of technical issues. My apologies for that. Let's just move on. Yeah, let's just move on. So yeah, let's just move on to our trip overview. First of all, our first trip that we're going to be going on is Madeira. Group booked for this. In fact, we're almost sold out. We've got a couple of rooms left in my last chat with Paula. And I'm excited about this. This is the first of a series of liveaways that we're going to be doing. And just to touch on liveaways, the idea behind this is that we go to a destination for a longer period of time, typically around 4 weeks. And in some cases, like in Cyprus, we're going to 2 spots. In some places like Madeira, because it's a small island, we're going to be staying just in and around Funchal. And we have a whole roster of activities and excursions that we can do. And you get to choose which ones you're going to do, which is neat because, for some people, they want to go away for a month. In February, the weather is likely to be lousy here. And in Madeira, will be spring as it is all year round. And you'll be able to do as much or as little as you want. And so it's been very interesting as all of those who booked on that trip have selected the excursions. As I expected, some people said, we want to do everything. And other people have, chosen a more modest number. Included in the trip price is an activity credit. So this is a neat, unique concept that we've come up with so that you can do a bunch of stuff that's already included in the price. If you want to do everything, it's a little bit more. And if you don't want to do anything, or if you want to do less, and you have activity credit left over, I'll give you the money back. So the point is that, with a lot of trips, people worry about going on them and and if I don't participate in something, well, I've paid for it and I feel like I've lost out. In this case, you'll be able to choose sort of the degree of activity that you want to go on. And Madeira, I was there in October, and this is a magnificent country. These stupendous volcanic mountains, not active volcanoes like in La Palma, in case anybody's wondering, with walking trails throughout the levadas, which are, like you see in the picture here, very flat sort of water channels that come down out of the mountains into the city, and great culture and food. We're going to be sampling the Madeira wine, which is of course so famous, and some of the other beverages that they produce there. They grow bananas in Madeira, and there's nothing like a place that has sort of farm to table cuisine, because a lot of the food that gets served at dinner is local. And all in all, as I say, this is going to be a marvelous trip, and we have a few spots left on that. In March, a small group of us are not me. This is not hosted by one of us from here. It's hosted instead by Mohammed Yunus, which is our Egyptologist, who's a fantastic guy. So a small group of members, 12 in total, will be going on an Ultimate Nile cruise. We have 1 cabin left. So if you're still thinking about going to Egypt, this is a magnificent trip on this Dahabia, they call it. It's a luxury 6-cabin vessel sailing between Luxor and Aswan. This is going to be at the beginning of March. The trip itself begins with some days in Cairo, seeing the sights there, the Egyptian Museum. Probably not the Grand Egyptian Museum, because it looks like the opening is going to be delayed yet again, but the other museum is still quite impressive. The pyramids of Egypt, of Giza, sailing on the Nile, of course, and visiting Abu Simbel and, all the other things that go with it, the Valley of the Kings. So this is a marvelous trip that is happening in March. And as I say, if anybody's interested in that still, we have 1 cabin left. Out of the 6 that are on that trip. So let us know. Then in March, So we're going to be heading out on our next Live Away program to Cyprus. So Cyprus, eastern part of the Mediterranean, south of Turkey. And I was, there we go, the slide. I was also in Cyprus in the beginning of November. And again, what a phenomenal country. The coastline, like you see here, is just amazing. The color of the water is like I've hardly seen anywhere else. Cyprus is a larger island. And so we partway through last year decided to switch the program into 2 stops. We're going to spend half of it, 2 weeks, in Limassol, which is the largest city on the southern coast of Cyprus, south of the Troodos Mountains. And then the other half of the trip is going to be to on the west coast. To Paphos. And so from Limassol, we get to visit the northern parts of Cyprus. Of course, Cyprus being a divided island. Many of us know the Canadian peacekeepers, of course, were there for 25 years. It's stable, the situation there, the political situation. We can go back and forth across the border. And it's very, very interesting to learn about the recent political history, not to mention the ancient history of Cyprus that dates back to, pre-Roman times. Amazing place to visit, lovely climate as well. They get some 330 days of sun a year. And we have we switched again to a lovely boutique hotel in Limassol, right in the heart of the old city. And we have a lovely hotel as well, not far from the seashore in Paphos. So this is our Cyprus Live Away program. And we have again, almost full group on that. We do have maybe one or two rooms left if you're still interested in joining us for Cyprus. If you're interested in that, please do call us. We will be running these programs again next year in 2023. So I should say that as well. So if you feel like, oh, not so sure about going this year, then stay tuned, and sometime early in the new year, we'll be introducing our programs for next year. Continuing on from there, going back over to the Atlantic in the end of March, we have our trip to Porto in the Azores. So this is a trip that was postponed, obviously, a few times since the start of the pandemic. And we'll first go to the archipelago of the Azores. So this is also part of Portugal, like Madeira is, but much further north. So it's basically due west of the Portuguese mainland. We're going to be visiting the primary island of São Miguel. This is where most of the action happens in the Azores. And we're going to stay at a lovely spa resort in a volcanic crater in Furnas, from where we'll be able to explore the incredible scenery of this island. And I've been to the Azores a number of times. I always am, driving around, and just, you want to stop at every corner for the vistas that they have between, the volcanic mountains, again, all dormant, the crater lakes, and then looking out to this sort of azure blue sea. The Azores is really amazing. So we'll spend 5 nights in the Azores, and then we'll continue on to Porto, which is the second largest city in Portugal, in the northern part of the country at the mouth of the Douro River. Porto, I must admit, I only recently discovered in the last couple of years, and I was so taken by it. I'm a big Lisbon fan, but now that I've been to Porto, wow, this is a city that, particularly from a culinary aspect, has so much to offer, so many incredible restaurants. Of course, all of the port wine places that line the banks of the Douro River in downtown Porto. And so we'll spend 5 nights here. We'll spend a day up in the Douro Valley as well. Our local guide, Ricardo, is a lovely chap. I met him when I was over there on my way to where was I going? To Madeira. So really looking forward to this trip in March. We do have some spaces available. So I think we have 4 or 5 spots still available on that trip, in case you're interested in joining us to Porto in the Azores in the end of March. The climate is spring. It's, they're probably a month ahead of us. So the weather is like you'd find in the end of April, beginning of May in both Porto and the Azores. Myself in April will be heading to Tuscany for our first Live Away program there. And what makes this program unique is that we're going to spend the first 2 weeks of the program in the city of Florence, which is, I think, known to everyone, at least sort of geographically, right in the middle of Italy. And it's the capital of the region of Tuscany. We'll spend 2 weeks in some lovely apartment hotels right in the center of Florence. So a few minutes walk from the Duomo, the huge cathedral. And we'll have, again, like with our other Live Away programs, we have a whole list of excursions that you can choose from to visit not only Florence, but also up to Cinque Terre, to Bologna, to some cities and so on around the area. But the focus will be on Florence. And, some people think, wow, could I spend 2 weeks in Florence? Well, if you've not been to Florence, believe me, you could spend a lot more time in Florence. There is so much to see: the museums, the galleries, the people watching. There is magnificent. It's one of my favorite cities anywhere. The second half of the trip, we're going to go drive down to Cortona, which is a very well-known hilltop town in the southeastern part of Tuscany. And Cortona is, again, I visited there also in the beginning of October of this year to look at some of the villas. We again made some changes on that because Cortona, as I say, it's on a hill, a fairly steep hill. And so some of the villas that we had were sort of outside of town, but we've identified some lovely villa apartments that are as close to the center of town as you can get. There's one flat street in town and everything else is a hill, which adds to the charm of it. It's a truly charming place. And so, again, wonderful vibe to hang out for a couple of weeks, and we'll be traveling to all kinds of interesting places for the more rural experience of Tuscany, Montepulciano, a few of the other towns that I'm having a difficult time pronouncing, but the general area in southeastern Tuscany. There are definitely spots still available on that trip. We have a lot of interest for it. And so, we'd like to definitely get a few more members along to Tuscany in a Majestic Fjords of Norway trip. So this one is one that's also been postponed twice, obviously, because of the pandemic. And the fjords of Norway are some of the most spectacular coastline anywhere in the world. And I've done this trip many, many times, over 10 to 11 times. I can't even remember. It is breathtaking. So we do a round trip voyage on so-called Hurtigruten from Bergen, a second largest city, which is down in the south. The map here is a little bit small to see, but of course you can look at our brochure, and we stop at 34 ports of call all the way up to Kirkenes, which is on the Russian border. And then we turn around and go back. And the interesting thing about the cruise is that the itinerary in the daytime on the way north is at night on the way back, and vice versa. So this trip is a must do. Now, something I have to say about Portugal, because I know some of you are very astute about Portugal, about Norway. Norway currently is closed to travelers outside of the EU. And so we are waiting for advice on that, about what will happen, because God knows everybody that's booked on Norway really wants to go. So we're hoping we're going to be able to go. We're going to be reviewing the situation, as we are with everything, week by week. The next time probably around the middle of January, to see exactly what is happening with Norway and what their plans are to open and what we're going to do about it. But nevertheless, I encourage you, if you're interested in checking out Norway, this will be, I want to say, probably one of the best cruises that you could ever do. And I note it as well. And I don't want to pretend that I'm against cruise travel, avoiding cruise travel. What that exactly means and how we're interpreting that as it relates to, there's 5,000 passenger cruise lines and there's ones that have a lot smaller number of people, is still a little bit undefined. We'll keep you posted. But nevertheless, I just wanted to let you know that program is still happening. Similarly, in the beginning of May, we're going to be going to Croatia. Now, this trip is or was sold out, but I think that a couple of people may have dropped off. So there may still be a chance to get into this one. Here, we're going to be visiting, first of all, Slovenia. So Ljubljana, the capital, which I remember when we went with a group about 3 years ago. People were really taken aback by Slovenia. It is a hidden gem in Europe. And it's an amazing country to visit. We're actually going to stay at Lake Bled, which is that famous turquoise blue lake that you see here a picture of in autumn. It doesn't look like this in May. It looks more green and turquoise blue waters. We're going to tour around Slovenia for a few days, drive down to the southern part of Croatia to Split, where we'll embark on our ship, which will be almost exclusively ours. So there would probably be a handful of other people on our boat. And you can see a picture of it there. It's not a big boat. It actually in total holds about 34 passengers. So it's a small boat, and we're going to weave in and around the islands in the archipelago and the fjords of southern Croatia, some of the most beautiful coastline and villages as well. They compare often the Croatian fjords to the Norwegian fjords. Not quite as high and dramatic, but nevertheless, an amazing experience. So that trip we are doing in May, and we're also doing it again in October. But I just wanted to mention to you that there may be a spot or two available on the May trip if you're interested to go. Also happening in May, hopefully, is our trip to Sicily, Malta, and the Aeolian Islands. So this is a trip we launched quite a while back. We arrive in Rome and then transfer down to Naples, from where we embark on, again, a small ship that we have. This is a family-owned yachting company out of Greece that I've worked with for many years in the past. And we will visit a little bit of the coast around Naples, visiting like Capri and passing by the Amalfi Coast. Then we'll head down to the Aeolian Islands, which is someplace you'll never otherwise get to unless you go on a trip like this, because they're just not as accessible. And then we'll go along the coast of Sicily and end up in Malta and spend 5 days exploring the incredible island of Malta, which was my last stop in Europe before I came back to Canada at the end of last month. And Malta, Valletta in particular, is truly a spectacular island. So to get a taste of Sicily and Malta in this area, we will likely, hopefully, be running this trip in May, and there are still spots available on it. Yeah, moving along, just a couple more things, programs that I wanted to mention that are happening this year. Why we designed this island hopping program is because, a lot of people go to Greece and then you have the cruise ship experience, which is, you land in Santorini and you're there from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. The thing with Greece is that I think that these islands merit a much longer visit and a longer stay. So we put this program together such that we have 4 nights in Crete, and we'll be on it's in the western part of Crete, in a place called Chania, which is I think it's the second largest city after Heraklion, the capital. And we'll be all exploring and really getting an insight into Greek island life, particularly in Crete. So we'll go far more in depth than you would if you go on a sort of a typical Greek cruise. From Heraklion, then we'll take a ferry over and we'll visit Santorini. So we will visit perhaps the most famous of Greek islands, and spend a few days in Santorini. And go to a couple of the islands around that. And then we'll spend a few days in Paros, which is one of those islands that in many ways looks similar to a Santorini or a Mykonos, but it's just a little more off the beaten track, offers just as much to see and do. And, the weather at this time of the year is usually perfect. It's not too hot, so we can swim in the beautiful Greek Mediterranean there. And then so a few days there before heading back to Athens. So this is kind of a unique way to experience Greece, because we're going to be going by ferry, island hopping, and taking all these beautiful places into in a much longer stay format. Then in June, we're going to be going to Ireland. Oh, and on Greece, we have spots available on Greece. So that trip is still available. Then next one we're doing, and I've only got 2 left, I think. Sorry, 3. We're going to Ireland in June. We have a good group already on this trip. And so similarly, again, with Ireland, I think many of you will know my philosophy on travel at this point. We are going to be spending a little bit longer in each place, starting off, of course, in Dublin, the capital, and then from there going out to the west coast to visit Galway and the area around the west coast of Ireland, the cliffs of Moher, and all those spectacular sites. We'll then head down to Killarney, which is in the southwestern part of Ireland, to see the Ring of Kerry, which is, of course, on everybody's bucket list that goes to Ireland, but also the Dingle Peninsula. And again, this is is what I like when we stay for 3 or 4 nights in one place. We can do things that you don't normally get to see, and you see some of these wondrous sights in this beautiful island of Ireland. And so I'm very excited about this trip in June. And let's see. So jumping forward from there, Joel, we will jump to the 5x5 programs. So in Scandinavia and the Baltic. So we have 2 happening this summer. We've got a few people signed up for the 5x5 program already. And this, again, like our liveaways, is a very unique concept. Sorry, Joel. And I know we're having a bit of a technical issue there. If we could advance to the 5x5s. Just to round out our webinar today, as I say, our 5x5 program, we spent 5 nights in each stop, starting in Copenhagen. And on a 5x5, we curate roughly half the program so that you get roughly 2 days of organized activities. So, seeing the major sites of these beautiful capitals of Scandinavia and the Baltics. And the other 2 days is free time. But much like with our liveaways, it's like, we're not just like, okay, well, go and do whatever you want. I mean, we give you ideas. The host is there to sort of point you in the right direction and ensure that you get to have the experience that you want to have. And, the beauty, of course, in Scandinavia, these cities are totally safe. They're mostly very walkable. So there's so much you can see and do in a very relaxing kind of a way. So we'll stop in Copenhagen. We'll then head up to Stockholm. And from Stockholm, after 5 nights there, we'll take a ferry over to Helsinki. And then from Helsinki, then we cross the Baltic Sea to Tallinn, Estonia. From there down to Riga, Latvia, and then ending up in Vilnius. Now, the other thing about a 5x5 is that you may have said, well, I've already been to Copenhagen, or I've already done the Baltic states. So you don't have to do all 5 stops, which would be 25 nights. You can do any combination of 2 or more. So you can do just 10 nights or 15 or however many nights that you want. So there's some flexibility there as well on that experience. So good. So that wraps up the first half of the year. So I hope that was a little bit informative. And I think that there are a couple of questions that have come in. And so if you do have a question about anything that we've covered today, if it's specific to a booking that you've made with us on one of our trips, then it's best if you just drop Paula an email, and we'll give you a call back about any sort of specific questions. But if you have general questions, please let me know. I see here from Ardell asked earlier on in the webinar, given the movement in airline prices, how, if somebody wants to book through us, what would the timing of the booking work? But generally speaking, what happens is if you want to book your airfare through us, and so we have an air ticket guideline, which Paula can send to you when you're at the point of wanting to book your airfare, because you don't have to book it with us. In fact, I'm just as happy if you don't book it with us, to be perfectly blunt, but we're also happy to facilitate it for you. But it's important that you read that document to understand how airfares work today and what is involved. We will give you a quote generally within 24 hours, perhaps right on the spot. It just depends on the volume of what's going on. And then we'll give you a quote, and then we'll confirm the ticket more or less right away. And because, as I say, airline prices are very volatile. So we try to give you a quote and say, here's the number. And then if it's within sort of $50 of that number, we're gonna jump on it. And so do read the guideline that we have produced on that. And again, you can get it from Paula about how that works. And then we'll go from there. Good. I don't think there are any other questions. Paula, do we have any other questions this morning? Because otherwise.
No, I don't see anything else. There was Wally's question, but we can look at that because, again, we're not following what the U.S. State Department restrictions are.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll get back to Wally on that, and on that specific question with regards to Cyprus and the advisory there, which frankly I was unaware of.
One has popped up here from Francis.
Please.
Are we continuing to actively plan for tours in 2023, given what is going on? Thinking 100%. Of Africa and Australia.
So. Yeah, 100%. So as I said at the outset, 2022 is still going to be a rocky year for travel, given that the wave in the pandemic is undoubtedly going to continue. I'm an optimist. I think the situation is going to improve. And as I say, at this point, we are planning to run all of the tours that we currently have scheduled until further notice. So for 2023, absolutely, we're working full tilt on trips in 2023. And so we're definitely going to be going off to Africa. So we have Namibia and Botswana, a wonderful trip that we're planning there, which is already half sold out. Australia, we have not released yet because for lack of wanting to, but a lot of places, because of the how should we say, complicated the whole industry is right now. People that previously we could book and arrange things a year and a half or 2 years out, they're not as able to do that because inflation is a factor now. There's hotels that were around or perhaps not around anymore. Talking about Australia and our rail journey, they've told us the date. They haven't told us if they can actually give any spots yet because Australia has been closed for so long that they have so much commitments from previous years that they have to fulfill before they can, allocate new spots. So much stuff going on. So we just ask you to be a bit patient with us on all respects because we are doing what we can to sort through this whole mess. And again, we are doing our best to keep you informed exactly as soon as we know, generally speaking, Alina asked about if Mauritius is still a possible live away for early 23. It's possible, but less likely than before. Not because I don't think Mauritius is a great destination, but we're reevaluating what our live aways that we're going to do in 2023. We're going to do Bali for sure. We're going to do Koh Samui for sure. We're going to do Madeira, Cyprus, and likely Malta in 2023, and we're going to do probably a New Zealand one as well that'll back onto Bali. But we'll come back to you on that because again, we're busy trying to get 2022, the first part of the year, sorted out and settled so we can have a wonderful experience. And then we'll be on to 2023 as soon as possible. So, and yes, Sandy, New Zealand is on the books for sure, where it's all in progress. So in closing, I want to say thank you very much for your support over this year. If you have any questions at all, you're welcome to drop us an email at any time. I should note, we will be taking a much needed break between Christmas and New Year's. So we're still going to be checking emails because that's just how we are. But we're really going to try to take the time between the 24th of December and the 3rd or 4th of January off. And just because we all need a bit of a break. But if something comes up, it's not like we're disappearing off the face of the earth. We'll be around. So, if there's an urgent thing, you can leave us a message and we'll get back to you. Thank you for your support this year, for your patience and indulgence. As you know, it's been a trying year for all of us. And it's been a trying year for the whole world. But we will get through this. I'm optimistic. Please be optimistic yourselves. Our next webinar will be next year on the 6th of January, where I'm delighted we're going to be launching the Camino de Santiago, which is our pilgrimage. It's a walk. You can call it a pilgrimage if you want, from central Spain into Santiago de Compostela. So we're going to be telling you all about that first thing in the new year on January 6th. Lots of other great stuff to come. Thank you again. Merry Christmas to all, and have a wonderful, safe holiday. And I look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon in the new year.